Now, our next witness wishes to be anonymous. So let me tell you what that means. This is the first witness who's giving evidence anonymously here in Cardiff. Those of you who've been following proceedings elsewhere, live streaming, will have seen other witnesses give their evidence anonymously elsewhere. And in each case, I make a legal order, the full terms of which I read out before the witness gives evidence. That is because breach of it is actually a very serious matter. It is a contempt of court. It will be treated in that way. And so the order is one which, like orders of the court, is there to be obeyed. It has exactly that effect. The purpose is to protect someone from other people discovering who he or she is. For that reason, each of the witnesses who wishes anonymity and for whom anonymity is granted will be known by a letter, and because we have exhausted the alphabet first time round, there will be two letters, the first of which for the next alphabet begins with A, and we will have reached A-E in the case of the next witness. So that's how he, in his case, will be known. What this means is that there won't be any live streaming of the image of the witness. In some cases, for reasons, again, of protecting others and his or her anonymity, there won't be any transmission of the recording either. And it follows, I must ask you, to be very careful if you are taking photographs in and around this building. You've seen when you come into the hall, there's a notice there saying no photography, no filming within this room. But if you are taking photographs outside, which you may well be, please just take care that you don't inadvertently catch Mr. A.E. in one of those photographs, because that would tend to show anyone who gets a photograph that he was here, and it's better that people don't know that. You, however, are privileged by being here because you will see the witness, unless the witness wishes, and some witnesses might. We haven't yet had one, but it's open to witnesses to keep themselves away from your gaze in any case anyway. But that's not the case with Mr. A.E. So, the order I make reads like this. The name and address of witness W2422, that's Mr. A.E. to you and me, the name of his wife and the name of any other member of the witness's family, and any other identifying information, such as the witness's image or a description of their appearance, cannot be disclosed or published in any form unless express permission is given by me or by the solicitor to the inquiry acting on my behalf. Witness W2422 must be referred to only as Mr. A.E. The order remains in force for the duration of the inquiry and at all times thereafter, unless otherwise ordered, and I may vary or revoke the order by making a further order during the course of the inquiry. Well, that's the order. With that introduction, let's have Mr. A.E., please.
Mr. A.E., your full name is known to the inquiry. Could you please take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Nothing but the truth.
Mr. AE, you had severe haemophilia A,
Yeah.
and that was diagnosed at birth.
Yeah.
And as a child, you were constantly in and out of hospital with bleeds.
Yeah.
You used to receive cryoprecipitate a lot. What can you recall about the process of receiving cryoprecipitate?
I had an inhibitor against cryo and the factor 8 and everything. So I was always hospitalised constantly. I spent half my life in hospital, really. And the cryo was in the early days, you know. Like the 70s, late 70s, and it got a bit better then, you know.
And because of the inhibitor that you've mentioned, you would have to be given larger doses and
Yes.
spend longer periods of time receiving the treatment.
Yeah.
And as you've said, lots of time in hospital,
Yeah.
often with bed rest as well.
Yeah,
And you've missed a lot of school.
loads.
And you said in your statement, said again just now, you feel like you spent half your childhood in
Yeah.
hospital. Now, from about 1977, you were under the care of Professor Bloom.
Yeah, well, from an early age, Dr. Bloom when I first.
And you started to receive factor 8
Yeah.
on a very frequent basis. Can you recall whether Professor Bloom or anybody else at the hospital gave you any information or advice or warnings about any risk of infection?
Nothing at all.
What, if anything, were you told about the factor 8?
It's a wonder drug, you know. But I still couldn't, because I had an inhibitor, I still couldn't go on home treatment, so we had to go in. There's a few of us that had inhibitors were always in together, you know.
You've talked about Professor Bloom in your statement as the doctor who called all the shots at the haemophilia
Yeah.
centre.
Yeah.
So his word was what everybody
Oh, yeah.
went by.
Yeah.
And you've described the early 1980s as actually a rather happy period for you
Fine.
because you were starting to tolerate the products more and the inhibitor issue became less of a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
What, if anything, can you recall about the type of factor 8 products you received?
I had so many. There's on my notes there, there's so many different types.
Was there ever any discussion with you about the differences between different
No.
products, NHS or American
No.
products?
Didn't question it.
Now, there came a time in the 1980s when you were told by Professor Bloom that you had been infected with what we now know as HIV. What can you recall about that conversation?
I just come back from family holiday in Spain, and I was on A7. I was in a 4-bedder, and he came up with his entourage. So they come in on a Saturday into hospital, Sunday, getting better. I was supposed to be going home on the Monday, and he came up with the entourage. He told all them to go. He pulled the curtain round, and he said, "I got something to tell you. You've got the AIDS virus." Devastated me.
And your response was, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah, and he told me not to say nothing to nobody. I said, I'm going to phone my mother now. No, I'd rather you not. Because we don't know what we're going to do yet, more or less, you know. And just devastated. And he just said to me, you just go and answer no questions. But that day I had an answer off him in the end, you know, about life expectancy. Yeah.
And what was the answer he gave you in relation to life expectancy?
Don't know how long I've had it, but he said 18 months, 2 years.
You, in your statement, thought that that was 1987.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I know it wasn't.
When now do you think
85.
And without mentioning any names, that's in part because you know of other people who were given the diagnosis.
Yes.
You know it was the same time as
Same
you.
time, yeah.
And they know that it was
Yes.
1985, and that's
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
traced it to 1985. Were you given any information at that stage, other than the shortened life expectancy, about treatment or how to manage the condition? Or
Nothing whatsoever. Just no counselling, nothing. No, he just didn't want to see us. I wanted to see him, like, have more meetings with him. He just said he wasn't available, you know. And it was just nobody, just on my own. And my mother, you know.
did you know that you had, in fact, were being tested for HIV, HTLV3?
No.
And you've described in your witness statement that your reaction was one of complete shock.
Well, it was just before you told me, but a week before I went on holiday, I seen a documentary on the gays in America all dying of this disease, and the next thing, I'm an happy 19-year-old, and all of a sudden I've got this disease. You can't write it, you know.
Just going to look at one document, Mr. A.E. Paul, it's 2422002, please. And if we can turn it round. This is an extract from the haemophilia database, National Haemophilia Database, and we've got their date first positive, 15th of July 1984. Now, when you wrote your statement, you were concerned that that might have meant that doctors knew from 1984,
yeah.
but you weren't told till 1985.
Yeah.
In fact, I think, as you now know, it's not clear when you were first
No.
tested and whether that represents a sample that was stored
Yes.
and later
I don't know,
tested,
yeah.
or whether it
Yeah.
represents the date of a test.
Yeah.
But in any event, you simply hadn't been told at any
No.
point that you were going to be tested at all.
No, nothing at all.
Now, you ignored Professor Bloom's advice and did call your mother,
Yeah.
and she came to the hospital. But apart from a very small number of family members, you kept your diagnosis secret.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Stigma was terrible. Absolutely terrible. Not only that, it was a disease. You felt dirty and, you know, just the adverts on telly just degrades you, like, you know.
And you've said in your statement that the effect of the diagnosis on you, a 19-year-old
Yeah.
young man, was you felt very alone.
Terrible, yeah.
You felt that people, if they knew of your diagnosis, would assume you'd contracted it through sex or drugs.
Or being gay or whatever, yeah.
You had difficulty sleeping because you thought you were going to die.
Didn't sleep for days on end.
You felt worthless.
Yeah.
And your words, you went off the rails.
Right off the rails. Self-destruct button was pushed, you know.
Now, I'm going to ask you about a couple of incidents. One was when you were walking home. We won't mention any names or place names, but you were walking home and you had an encounter with a police
officer, yeah.
What can you remember about that?
Well, the police were told, apparently, and I was classed as like a lethal weapon. They classed me as. And I was in, I won't say the place, but I was walking to a town centre, and I was eating a curry and chips in the tray on the way home about 2 in the morning. And I was going down to get a taxi, and he said, "No, you go that way." I said, "No, I want to get a taxi." And I could hear him, he's behind me, and that just antagonised me all the way, you know. We know all about people like you and all that, and so I just attacked him, and
And the reference to people like you was to a person who was infected with HIV.
yeah, we do want people like you in the town, yeah.
You felt suicidal on a number of occasions.
Big time.
There's one occasion you've described to me about standing on a
motorway bridge,
motorway bridge.
Yeah.
Are you able to tell us about that?
Yeah. It was on a Sunday night. I think I'd come to the lowest point in my life, really. Stood on a motorway bridge waiting for a lorry to come, but one didn't come, you know. So I thought, imagine I survived the accident. That's what was worrying me, surviving the accident on top of what I got. So by now, I've been prescribing big amounts of epinephrine and a drug called Palfium. So I went home and took the old bottle of epinephrine about 2 in the morning. Didn't want to get found. I just went to sleep in my bed. And my mother had a thump. She came in and I was blue in the face, and they worked on me all night then to keep me alive, you know. Right.
You became addicted to the drugs that were prescribed to you. the drug you've mentioned, Palfium, which was a painkiller,
Very strong painkiller, yeah.
and to diazepam and temazepam.
Oh, yeah, and everything.
And you've described yourself in your statement as someone who went from a happy young man to a drug addict.
Completely, yeah. Completely crazy.
What can you tell us about that time in your life?
Just frightened to die. That was the main thing, taking all these drugs. Frightened to die. Because I've been in hospital and watching these people die of this dreadful disease, especially good friends, you know, is that you just want to go through that. Call it gutless, I don't know. But I felt gutless because I just didn't want to die that way. Because they were so brave, you know. They knew they would die at night. And, they were seeing grown men come to nothing, good friends, and broke my heart. So I just drowned it out with, as long as I was absolutely out of it, that's when I was happy. So I went to my GP, and he prescribed me 90 Palfium a week, everything, whatever I wanted, for 2 years. And then he went in there one day and he just said, no more. And that's when I got admitted into call it a mental institute.
You've said in your statement that taking these drugs that you've been prescribed made you feel nothing, made you forget that you'd been contaminated with the HIV virus and had a death sentence hanging over your head. Yeah. It was your way of blocking everything.
It was frightening to die in, yeah. It was frightening because it was like drawing straws, really, because he'd got full-blown AIDS this week, you know, he'd got a couple of months to go, and it'd be another one, and then 6 months' time, and it'd be another one in 3 months' time. I thought, oh, I got to be next, surely. And that's the only way to drown it out. There was no counselling, there was nothing.
You were admitted to a mental health unit. Yeah. And you've described in your statement the physical symptoms you were experiencing at the time, cramps, sweating, still wanting to die.
Yeah.
And that was the first of 2 occasions when you were admitted.
Yeah.
And what happened in between the 2 admissions? How were things in that time?
Well, I got in and they put me on a drug called methadone. And I sort of come off that nearly. As soon as I was right in there, like institutionalized, you know. As soon as I come back out, you're again, somebody in the hospital are gone again, you know. Or you go in because you're at the inhibit and you know you'll be in all the time. And just back on it again,
And you put it this way in your statement, after that first admission and then going out again and taking drugs again, you said mentally I lost it.
Yeah, completely.
And you were admitted to the mental health unit again. Just going to look at one document. It's a letter from a psychiatric doctor. 2422005, please, Paul. We can see it's a letter from, if we go down to the bottom of the page, please, Paul, to start with. Just right down to the bottom. So it's a letter from a Dr. Thomas, a senior registrar in psychiatry. It's dated the 6th of May 1987, and we'll look at the second paragraph. It explains that you'd suffered with severe haemophilia all his life. This has necessitated his receiving many transfusions of factor VIII through no fault of his own, as with some other haemophiliacs. This resulted in him catching the AIDS virus. As I'm sure you can appreciate, as a result of this, he's become very depressed, and I was asked to see him approximately a year ago when I prescribed some antidepressant medication for him. He did make a reasonable recovery on this, but continues to worry about his condition, although at present he does seem to be physically well and shows no sign of the AIDS disease itself at present. He is, however, aware of the very real possibility of him developing the condition at any time, and over the last 6 months particularly has had great difficulty in coming to terms with this. As a result of his worry, he's taken to drinking in order to try to relax, and also has started to use his opiate drugs, and of course he has a legitimate supply of these in order to treat his spontaneous bleeds. And then the next paragraph, please, Paul. He's found that taking opiate drugs has helped him to forget his problems, and then it talks about the problems that had brought in you being in receipt of treatment. And then it says this: I've now started to prescribe methadone for him on a regular basis and shall in due course notify him to the Home Office as a registered addict. He is, of course, not in quite the same class as the other addicts that attend the drug clinic, as he could, in all honesty, be described as a therapeutic addict. And it's that phrase, therapeutic addict, that's stayed with you and is important to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you've said in your statement you'd never, prior to your diagnosis, had the mindset of a recreational drug user.
No, I used to like a drink with the boys, you know, and never...
It was the diagnosis that, in your words, made you feel worthless.
Well, I'm frightened, petrified.
And you've said also in your statement that you believe if you'd had counselling at an early stage, that might have made a difference. Is that right?
Yeah.
Were you ever, during this time in the 1980s or 1990s, offered counselling?
No one.
Now, you learnt in the early 1990s, again, the precise date's not clear, that you'd also been infected with hepatitis C.
Yeah.
How did you learn of that diagnosis?
I got told in the centre, and I was told really that it wouldn't be a worry really to me, you know, because the AIDS more than there's to worry about. And that's what I got told.
And can you recall whether you were given much information about the hepatitis C diagnosis at that time?
No, tell the truth, I wasn't really interested because I was just worried about dying with this AIDS, you know, so I just didn't really, nothing could be as bad as AIDS when I, you know, in that time I just thought, well, I didn't realise what it was.
Now, you met your wife
Yeah.
in the early 1990s, and with her help you stopped drinking,
Yeah,
you stopped relying on drugs, and you broke your addiction.
yeah.
And you also credit Dr. Dasani with making a big difference to your life.
I wouldn't be the one for him, no.
You think you wouldn't be alive without
one
his
for him.
help.
No.
And you've talked about the way he treated you made you feel human.
Human again, yeah. Because up on the ward, when you had this virus, it was like outside your cubicle would be trolley, red bags, masks. Like somebody waiting to go on the Apollo 11, you know, like spacemen. Like, dreadful it was. You know, so how can they treat you like that when you walk into the hospital? But as soon as you're in, they treat you, they put all these, and Dasani used to come in and just take your bloods. No masks.
Can I ask you about the physical effects of the HIV and hepatitis C? We'll come on to the treatments that you received for both in a moment. But in terms of the physical effects, you've identified in your statement that you felt very tired and lethargic. You couldn't say whether that's one or other or both of the infections.
I don't know what it is, but I'm not the same person at all. Especially after the last not to interfere on ribavirin, you know. Just completely exhausted all the time.
And you had pneumonia in the early 1990s.
I didn't know that.
You didn't?
Didn't know, they didn't tell him.
Didn't tell me.
But that was something you found out later from medical records.
I think they thought I'd worried too much, perhaps. I don't know. They didn't tell me that. Because every little cold, I thought, this is it. This is the start of it. You know?
Now, you received a variety of different treatments for HIV over the years.
Yeah.
And that's had a number of different side effects.
The early days where they were horrible drugs, yeah.
Your teeth have been damaged.
Yeah.
And you've lost a number of teeth or had to have them removed.
Yeah.
Your joints have been damaged. In addition to the problems of the haemophilia, the HIV treatment has made it harder for you to walk. There was one drug that caused you to have regular nightmares.
Yeah, Indinavir. Drug called Indinavir. And you swear you just lived that. Another nightmare, you lived it, you know?
Some of the treatments made you violently sick.
Yeah.
And you still get very tired. Even on your current medication regime, you feel very tired, chronically fatigued. Also developed OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I met...
Sorry, could we stop the live transcript, please, sir?
Oh.
Don't worry. You're not the first witness. We'll just wait a moment and I'll be told when we can start again. Okay, we're fine to start again. So without mentioning your wife's name,
Right.
I'd asked you about the obsessive compulsive
Yeah, well,
disorder.
I met my wife and she had 2 children, and I didn't realise until I sat down and thought, and I thought, well, I could be fetching this into the house, this Hep C, HIV. So if I had a little nick on my finger, I'd go and bleach every door angle in the house, bleach it. The toilet seat, bleach it every time. I used to go ballistic, didn't it? Yeah. And completely, you know, really go over and over, bleach it, everything.
And is that something which still affects you?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
I want to ask you about the treatment for hepatitis C. You had some difficulty accessing that to start with. Why was that?
Because I won in the Cardiff area. Let again in Cardiff, that's where I received my death sentence, more or less. But they wouldn't give it because it cost too much. I had to go, I had to write to the health board, and they accepted me in.
You've had 2 courses of treatment.
Yes, one in the haemophilia centre, with Dr. Desani, and that didn't work. And the last lot worked.
So the first course of treatment involved interferon. Was that just interferon?
I can't remember interferon or something else. It was definitely
And
interferon.
ribavirin,
Yeah.
perhaps. And what side effects did you experience from that treatment?
Hair loss, depression, horrible thoughts, you know, just really horrible. Couldn't sleep for nights on end. Just not yourself at all, you know.
And you've also described you became very impatient, your mood changed.
Yeah, terrible. Since, I'm still the same now. Since the last lot, it's completely changed me to who I was.
That first course of treatment didn't succeed.
No, I was only on it for about 3 months, so they took me off it because it didn't work.
But you had a second course of treatment
Yeah,
a few years ago,
yeah,
and that did succeed in
Did
clearing the
succeed,
virus.
yes.
Did you experience side effects in relation to that second course of
Oh, yeah,
treatment?
big time, yeah.
Same kind of side effects?
Oh, worse, I think, yeah.
And although the hepatitis C virus has cleared, do you continue to experience the kind of fatigue and other side effects?
Yeah.
Now, it is in around 2006, you were told following a scan that your liver was cirrhotic.
Yeah, well, they done the fight, and I forgot everything I was getting on in my life, you know. And I went down the hospital for a fibre scan, and they need to take, I think it's 10 readings or something, but they only could do 6. And I went in to see the consultant after, and he said that the readings are very high, so I expect your liver severely damaged. I thought, well, how can that be, you know? He said, so I was in it, because I was worried a hell of a mess, so we had a meeting with him. And when I had a meeting with him, it was like, you know, we tried a fibre scan again, but they couldn't get a full reading again. And he was saying, well, so not all is lost, you can go on the transplant list. For 2 years I was, and then they found out my liver was okay. So I lived it again, you know.
For 2 years, you lived with the additional fear that you had cirrhosis and might need a transplant.
Yeah.
But in fact, a scan about 2 years later revealed that your liver was not
fine.
cirrhotic.
Yeah. But whether he should have said, I don't know, because all my bloods were always okay. So what he said, I don't know.
Do you receive any follow-up and checks on the state of your liver?
Yeah.
And how often do you receive those?
Oh, every 8 months, something like that, so, you know.
Did you ever receive as far as you can recall, any notification about being at risk of variant CJD?
Yeah.
What can you recall
Well,
about that?
it's just a letter come round to all haemophiliacs, I think. And, yeah, I have been exposed to it, yeah.
And what was the effect of that additional piece of information?
But what else? What's next? You know, you just don't know what's coming next from it, you know?
You've described in your statement an experience a few years ago in one hospital with the reaction of a nurse.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
I went in for a knee replacement in Landock. And about 8 years, 9 years, perhaps, might be 10 years. And it goes in, I was in a ward the night before, and in the morning she comes and puts the bed in the cubicle. I thought, don't mind that. But next thing, barrier nurse then goes up. And the trolley with the bags is like going back to the AIDS days now, you know. And then across the right from my room was a toilet, and she put out the water on it, and she came and said, that toilet's for you. It's out the water, nobody else will use it. And then one of the haemophilia nurses came in and ripped it all down. And said, you know, this is wrong.
And you explained in your statement that that made you feel inhuman.
Yeah, it's still doing. It's still the stigma still there. That's why I'm going on. You know, I don't want people to find out now. It's still there.
You've not been able to work.
No.
You've spent much of your time in and out of hospitals. In terms of financial assistance from the trusts and schemes, you've received a single payment from the Skipton Fund.
Yeah.
You receive monthly payments from was the Macfarlane Trust,
Yeah.
now the Welsh Infected Blood
WIB,
Support
yeah.
Scheme. You said in your statement they don't amount to very much.
It's begging all the time, and it's, you know, it's a begging ball, really.
And you've said you felt like a beggar
Yeah.
often on the phones to people, and it's made you feel worthless, the
Yeah, you
process
do,
of
yeah,
making the
yeah.
applications.
Yeah.
Mr. Aid, those are the questions I have for you. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, I just like to thank my wife, my mother, and everybody for putting up with me, you know, in them bad days, you know.
None of that. He's lovely. He is so lovely.
I'm just going to ask Mr. Williams.
And he had to put up with all this.
Just going to ask Mr. Williams if there's anything further. No, there are no further questions from him. Sir.
Can I thank you very much for coming to give your evidence. I think everyone can now understand why you wished to be anonymous with everything you've been through, and how difficult it may have been for you even to sit where you are and tell us what you have. But it's important, and thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we'll take a break now until 2:20.
Thank you, sir.
2:20.